What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews. We've got an 11-game slate, and I'm going to preview all the NBA player props that you need to see. We'll go through matchups. We'll talk about what's good and what's bad. We'll go through points, rebounds, and assists. Shit, might even get a bit sexy with it. Might even chuck some steals and blocks in there for you. But 11 games, there's a lot of action. So get ready to take some notes. Get your sports book out. Let's do this. So I'll be screen sharing today. I'll take you through outlier.bet if anybody's interested in doing their own research. I've got a 7-day free trial with Outlier. The link for that is in the description box of this video. Now, let's go. So we're kicking things off with the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Philadelphia 76ers. Giannis Antetokounmpo is a game-time decision. Chris Middleton is out. KJ Martin is a game-time decision. Rob Covington and Joel Embiid are both out as well. Now, in my last video, I did switch things up a little bit. For those of you who desperately wanted to switch things back, I'm letting you know, switching it back. So we'll go through a lot more players. I'll get through them a bit quicker. So I won't be diving in too deep. I'll leave you guys to do that by yourselves. Let's kick it off with this one, shall we? I want to start with Buddy Hield. He's at the top of the list. He's just also someone who we've had a bit of success betting on since he's made the move to Philly. But looking at his points prop firstly, his line's at 13.5, minus 110 odds. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. When was his first game with Philly? It was this one up against Atlanta. So he's had 6 games playing for Philly, and he's covered this line 5 times. The problem is, went under in his last game, and only scored 14 points against the Knicks. So some regression potentially as the 76ers start to get more players back. That we do not know. In terms of the matchup, it's a good one. The Bucks allow the 8th most points to shooting guards on the season. Having a quick look at Buddy Hield. So he's still averaging a decent amount of minutes. Shot attempts aren't bad either. So 13.5, I don't hate that, to be honest. Buddy Hield. I think that's the lowest we've seen his line as well since he's joined this team. So I don't hate his points prop here. This is a home game. So let's check his home games whilst he's been in Philly. So he's played 4 home games. Hit this 3 times. 3 out of the 4 home games since he joined the 76ers. So Buddy Hield points. That's on my maybe list. Let's have a look at his assists because that's been going quite well as well. Line's at 3.5. So he's been killing his assists since he joined. And then he had a shocker against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now that Cavs game, difficult matchup. So I'll give him a pass on that. The challenge with this play, though, is they now have Kyle Lowry in the lineup, which is an extra point guard, right? So Buddy Hield may not be required to handle as many playmaking duties. Line at 3.5, though, minus 110. It might be something that I screw around with. But what I have been betting on is his points plus assists. So he hit that in every single game up until that game against Cleveland. So, and I had to bet on that game too. So that might be a player that I take again over 17.5 points and assists. Definitely something that I'm considering at the moment. Let's jump into Tyrese Maxey. So we'll get through all the Philly players first. In terms of his points prop, line's at 26.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. He's got a great matchup. The Bucks allow the 4th most points to point guards on the season. In head-to-head matchups, Maxey's gone over in his last 2 against the Bucks. He's only played them once this year, though. Scored 31 points. So Maxey over in points. I'm definitely leaning that way. But you know I don't like odds like this. I'd prefer odds as close to even money as possible. But I don't hate this play. Tyrese Maxey to go over. Might be something I can play around with. Obviously, do some line shopping. If I do some line shopping and I find odds better than this, might be something that I take. Looking at his assist prop, his line is at 6.5, plus 120. Matchup's a difficult one. The Bucks allow the 7th fewest assists to point guards. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10 games. And against the Bucks, he's only hit this 1 of his last 5. But in his last game against them, he had 8 assists. So covered it quite well. But we got no Joel Embiid. So can he get those assists without Embiid? He sure can. But will he get them against the Bucks? So I think for someone like Tyrese Maxey, if I do like his points, maybe points plus assists could be a good option. Odds aren't great for that, though. But yeah, I think the points prop probably the one that I'd be leaning towards for Tyrese Maxey. Tobias Harris. God, this guy's frustrating. Just looking at his graphs frustrate me. His points line's at 16.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. In terms of the matchup, the Bucks allow the 12th fewest points to small forwards. And in head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 1 out of his last 4, but he did score 20 points in the last matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks. In terms of his assists, lines at 3.5. You can get that for plus money. Bucks allow the 13th most assists to small forwards. He has gone under this in 4 straight games against the Bucks, and in his last 10 games, he's hit this 5 times. Jumping into his rebounds, lines at 6.5. You can get that for plus 100. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. The matchup isn't good or bad. Bucks ranking 17th. And in head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 2 out of his last 4. Paul Reed, let's have a quick look at his points and his rebounds. Points-wise, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. He's gone under in his last 2. Has a great matchup. The Bucks allowed the 4th most points to centers on the season. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in all of them, but he was playing off the bench in all of those games. Now that he's a starter, you might expect something different. In terms of his rebounds, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. And against the Bucks, he's actually hit 10 rebounds before. That's interesting. But 1 out of his last 5. Jumping into these Bucks players, what do we got? Let's jump into Giannis. He's a game-time decision, but he is expected to play. His points props at 31.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. In head-to-head matches against Philly, he's only hit this in 2 out of his last 5. Scored 23 points the last time they matched up. The 76ers allow the 7th fewest points to power forwards on the season. But I haven't put many Giannis bets down, and I don't think I'm going to start now. Looking at his assist prop, lines at 6.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. The matchup's not good nor bad. And in head-to-head matchups, Giannis has gone under in 4 consecutive games against the 76ers. Looking at his rebounds prop, you can see he's hit this in 4 out of his last 5 against the Philadelphia 76ers. 12.5 rebound is his line. Got a good matchup. 76 allow the 6th most rebounds to power forwards on the season. And in his last 10, he's only hit this 3 times. We see an elevated line of 12.5 purely because the matchup is good. And he's done this against them in the past. But quite a high line if you ask me for Giannis, 12.5. 3 out of his last 10. I'm not entertaining that. No, thank you. So look at Dame Dollar. His points props at 23.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. He's got a difficult matchup. The 76ers allow the 4th fewest points to point guards. In head-to-head matches, Dame scored 39 points the last time these guys played each other. That's pretty wild. 39. That was back in October, though, early in the season. Dame's not putting up those type of numbers anymore. But yeah, tough matchup, but he scorched them before, and he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. Looking at his assist prop, 6.5. 76ers rank in the middle of the league in terms of assists allowed to point guards. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. Only had 4 assists in that last game against Philly. But scored 39 points, so he probably didn't need to. So the one thing I'd be interested to check for Dame is his points plus assists. So he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. He hasn't had... Well, his line's at 23.5. I'm just trying to see, is there a point where he doesn't cover that points prop, but his assist prop carries him over? So he's got one example here, but in all the other games, he fails to hit his points line. He doesn't get his assist line either. So you got to pick a game where Dame's going to be heavily involved, and I can't guarantee it's going to be this one. Brook Lopez, his points props at 12.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 games. He's got a good matchup. 76ers are now allowing the 6th most points at centers on the season. He's hit this in every single game against the Philadelphia 76ers. So 5 from 5. Scored 13 points against them in their most recent matchup. So I don't mind this. 5 out of his last 10. Let's go a little bit deeper, shall we? Let's check his last 10 away games. Whew! Brook Lopez covered his line in 6 straight games on the road. So Brook Lopez is a road warrior. I like that. Head-to-head matchup. I like that. And he's got a good matchup today. So Brook Lopez, I'm going to add him to my short list. All right, let's check his rebound line real quick. Line's at 5.5. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 10. The matchup's not a great one. 76 is allowing the 11th fewest points to centers on the season. Head-to-head matches, and he hit this in 2 out of his last 5. So, yeah, definitely the points prop is one to consider. So I like that. Buddy Hield, the way that his line's currently set, a lot of people will say that it's undervalued. So I still don't mind Buddy. So I'm going to put in my list of leans, meaning I'll have to go back and check before I place any bets. But, yeah, I don't mind that. Let's jump into the next one. Actually, before we jump into the next one, I just want to apologize that I wasn't able to get a video out the day prior. I got violently drunk. When I say violently drunk, I was so sick. Normally, from where I was, it should have taken me an hour to get home. Because of the state I was in, it took me 3 hours to get home. I'm still trying to retrace my steps to figure out how I got home, but I do know it took me 3 hours. And what made it worse is halfway through this 3-hour trip of me getting home, my phone went flat. So I couldn't catch an Uber. I couldn't call anybody. I was asleep most of the time anyway, so I'm not worried about that. I woke up, I caught the train home, missed my stop, woke up in God knows where, walked out of the train station, jumped into a taxi and said, "Where am I? Great. Now take me home." And then I fell asleep. And then boom shakalaka. So apologies. Violently ill. Got way too lit, but I'm back. All right. I'm going to push through. We've got another 10 games to go. I'm somewhat fatigued, but let's do this. Let's get into it. All right. We're looking at the Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. For this game, you guessed it. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, game time decision. So is Cam Reddish. Eric Gordon's a game time decision. Nurkic is a game time decision. Bradley Beal is out. Christian Wood, Gabe Vincent, Vanderbilt still out as well. So let's see what kind of props we have on the table and let's get to work. Let's start with all these Lakers. Starting with Austin Reeves. His points props at 14.5. He's covered that line in 8 of his last 10 games. That's pretty good. Matchup's not a great one. Suns ranking 12th in terms of points allowed to shooting guards. In head-to-head matches, he's covered this in 4 out of his last 7. So what we're seeing here is he's pretty much a lock for 10. 9 out of his last 10 games, he scored 10 plus, and he scored 10 plus in 7 consecutive games against the Phoenix Suns for those parlay players. But yeah, I'm not a fan of taking Austin Reeves at this line. Looking at his assists though, lines at 5.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered it in 3 of his last 7. The matchup is a good one, though. The Suns allow the 4th most assists to shooting guards on the season. So Austin Reeves, he's done it before, but yeah, he's a bit inconsistent in this regard. I guess it's hard when he's coming off the bench sometimes, right? So Austin Reeves, not bad. Rebound-wise, lines at 3.5, 5 out of his last 10, 2 of his last 7 against the Suns. Has a good matchup. Suns allowing the 5th most rebounds to shooting guards. So Austin Reeves, very capable of getting a lot of rebounds and a lot of assists. Has a good matchup in this game. Recent form's a little bit patchy, so do with that as you wish. Let's check out the king, LeBron James. His line's at 23.5. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. The Phoenix Suns, 5th fewest points to small forwards in the league. He's looking at head-to-head matchups. LeBron only scored 10 points the last time they played each other. 32, 31, the 2 games prior to that. So 2 out of his last 5 games, he's covered this line against Phoenix. Yeah, I'm not feeling it. I haven't put too many bets on LeBron James. I feel like out of most players, he probably has the sharpest lines. But let's check his assist prop out. Lines at 7.5. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. Phoenix Suns allow the fewest assists to small forwards in the league. In head-to-head matchups, LeBron says, "Fuck your matchups." On LeBron James, he's killed it. 3 out of his last 5. But check this out. 9 and 11 assists his last 2 games against Phoenix. So if he ain't scoring, he's going to impact the game in other ways. And at 7.5, at minus 105, I don't mind that. 70% hit rate in his last 10. Let's check him out on the road. LeBron James on the road, 6 out of his last 10. Okay. Not bad. I think I still might be willing to take it. Got 6 assists in his last road game against Phoenix. I probably won't take it. But that's interesting. 7.5 for LeBron James is not bad. Let's check his rebound prop out. Lines at 6.5 plus 100. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10 games. The matchup's a difficult one. The Suns allowing the fewest rebounds to small forwards on the season. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 3 out of his last 5. Only have 5 rebounds the last matchup against Phoenix. Having a look at D'Lo. Points props at 17.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. The matchup is a good one. Suns allow the 8th most points to point guards on the season. In head-to-head matchups, D'Lo's covered in 4 out of his last 6. He scored 19 points in the last matchup against the Phoenix Suns. Lakers lost by 18 points in that game, but D'Lo still contributed quite well. I don't mind this. This does look okay. The matchup is okay. Recent form isn't too bad. Let's check him out on the road only. On the road, he's covered in 6 out of his last 10 games. So that's not too bad for D'Lo. Checking his assist prop. Lines at 5.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Has covered in 3 straight. The matchup's not good nor bad, and against the Phoenix Suns, he's covered in 3 out of 6. So I think the line's just about right, to be honest. A couple of outlier games here. LeBron James is back in the lineup, so that's all I'm going to say about that. Checking out his rebound prop, line's at 2.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Suns allowed their 11th fewest rebounds to point guards on the season, and he's had 1 rebound in 2 consecutive games against the Suns. So, yeah, I wouldn't be feeling his rebound prop in this one. Let's have a look at Rui Hachimura, making the starting lineup these days for the Los Angeles Lakers. And points prop, his line's at 12.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. You can see he really started playing heavier minutes, 30-plus minutes, maybe from Charlotte onwards. Looking at head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in all of his games against Phoenix, but he was only playing 18 minutes per game in these ones. He should play over 30. So, yeah, I don't mind it. The matchup is okay in terms of points allowed. 9th most points allowed to power forwards on the season. Let's have a look at his rebounds prop. The line's at 3.5. He's hit this in 9 out of his last 10 games. The matchup is a difficult one. Suns giving up the 7th fewest rebounds to power forwards on the season, but 9 out of his last 10 is not bad at all. Head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 1 out of his last 5, but obviously he wasn't playing as many minutes. So, yeah, I think the line is about right, to be honest. The 3.5 to 4.5 is where it should be. 4.5, you should get plus money for it. This game, LeBron James didn't play, I believe. So let's look at games with LeBron. I know he did play. What am I talking about? He just didn't do much. So with LeBron James, he's hit this in 9 consecutive games. What are you trying to say? The game without LeBron, he didn't hit. Right. 5 out of his last 10 games with LeBron out of the lineup. And then when LeBron's in, he hits this line very consistently. So look at that. 4 rebounds. Could be a good option for your parlay players, perhaps. Rui Hachimura. Anthony Davis. Anthony Game Time Decision Davis. Line's at 24.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. He's on a 3-game stretch where he's covered this line in each game. I actually bet on him the last time they played. I said he's up against Wemby. He's going to eat. I think his line was like 23.5 in that game, and he covered it quite easily. In terms of the matchup, the Suns allow the 8th fewest points to centers on the season. Anthony Davis in head-to-head matchups has been inconsistent as hell. 4 out of his last 7, but he's gone loss, win, loss, win, loss. So, yeah, I'm not feeling Anthony Davis in this one. In terms of his rebounds, he's hit that only 3 of his last 7 games against the Phoenix Suns. The Suns do allow the 3rd fewest rebounds to centers. But in his last 10, he's been a rebounding beast. He's covered 7 out of his last 10 and in 4 consecutive games. Looking at his assist prop, line's at 2.5, and that seems very low. Hasn't gotten close to it in the last 3 games, though, so that's quite interesting. The Suns do allow the 8th most assists to centers on the season, and in head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in his last 2. 3 out of his last 7 he's hit on. So Anthony Davis, probably not passing the ball much. Jumping into these Phoenix Suns. So with no Bradley Beal, Eric Gordon's been starting, but Gordon's a game time decision as well. So I think if Gordon's no good to go, more opportunities for Booker and Kevin Durant by the looks of things. Let's have a look at Yusuf Nurkic. His points props at 10.5. The Lakers rank 16th in the league in terms of points to centers. He's gone under in 4 straight. And against the Lakers, he's hit in 1 out of his last 4. That's not good. Rebound-wise, his line is at 9.5. The Lakers allow the 3rd most rebounds to centers on the season. He's hit this prop in 4 out of his last 10 games. And in his last head-to-head matchup against the Lakers, he had 12. But prior to that, he went under this line in 3 consecutive games. He played the same amount of minutes, just didn't get the boards. Looking at his assist prop, because this guy can rack up the assists. 5 out of his last 10. The matchup is decent. Lakers giving up the 8th most assists. And in head-to-head matchups, he's hitting 2 out of his last 4. So nothing screaming out to me there for Yusuf Nurkic. Let's have a look at D-Book. Line's at 29.5. My Lord. Now, the Lakers, they allow the 9th most points to point guards on the season. Devin Booker hit this in 2 out of his last 4 games against the Lakers. Scored 31 the last time they played. I haven't put many bets on for Devin Booker this year, and I don't think I'm starting now. Looking at his assist prop, lines at 5.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. The Lakers rank 14th in assists allowed to point guards, and in head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 out of the 4 games. Having a look at KD. Kevin Durant, lines at 29.5. I know that he likes to perform against LeBron James, but he's hit this line in 3 out of his last 10, but he's gone under in 5 consecutive games. In head-to-head matchups against the Lakers, he's covered in 3 out of his last 4, only scored 18 points in the last run. And in these games, still playing a decent number of minutes, still taking a lot of shots too. Hasn't been shooting the ball quite well though. Look at that. Last 3 times he shot the ball 20 plus times. He shot the ball less than 50%. So he's famous for being an efficient scorer. He's been quite inefficient lately. So he's taking the volume. He's just not making the shot. Looking at Kevin Durant's assists, the line's at 5.5. The Lakers, not good nor bad when it comes to matchups. 6 out of his last 10 he's hit on. And against the Lakers, he's gone under in all 4 games. Checking out his rebounds prop. Whoa. Line is at 6.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. The Lakers allow the second fewest rebounds to power forwards on the season. Kevin Durant's gone over in 3 of his last 4, but seems to be declining. Game by game, it's gone down. So now with a lot of these star players, I always feel like the lines are too high. If you're going to bet star players, I think the under is probably the best way, and you just got to look for that. So he's gone under his PRA in 5 out of his last 10. And his last game against the Lakers, he sucked. But other than that, he's been good. But yeah, the points prop, I wouldn't be confident taking any of these. So I'm not even going to consider an under for Kevin Durant. Am I fucking crazy? Let's have a look at Grayson Allen. His points props at 12.5 plus 102. The matchup, the Lakers, neither good nor bad for both wing positions. He's hit this in 2 out of his last 10 games. Head to head against the Lakers, he's covered it in 1 out of his last 4. But let's check to see how he's gone without Bradley Beal. 4 out of his last 10. So that's not ultra convincing. What if we did Bradley Beal and Eric Gordon? That's not much better either. So Grayson Allen, not touching his points prop. Assist-wise, he's done well. 6 out of his last 10 games. The Lakers do allow the 9th most assists to shooting guards on the season. Head-to-head, he's covered in 2 out of his last 4. He went under in his last 2 games against the Lakers. Looking at his rebound prop, the line's at 4.5. He's hit this in 2 out of his last 10. He has hit this in 3 out of his last 4 games against the Los Angeles Lakers, though. But 4.5 seems quite high. He doesn't hit that very often. Check out his last 20 games. 6 out of his last 20. The matchup I wouldn't say is the best either. So a sportsbook might know something here. Grayson Allen, big rebounding game. If it happens, the sportsbook's all right. All right, so looking at this Lakers and Suns game, there's not much really screaming out to me, to be honest. I haven't taken notes for none of this. Might be one of those games where you just sit back and enjoy. Probably Austin Reeves, but yeah, I didn't get the strongest feeling going through these numbers, but we'll see. Check my pin comment. I should have my pin comment with my final bets probably an hour after I upload the video. But as always, I encourage you to do your own research anyway. Don't blindly follow anybody online and take their bets. That's the best bet I can give you. Jumping into the Dallas Mavericks versus the Indiana Pacers. So Luka, Lively, Maxi Kleber, all game time decisions. Jaden Smith from the Pacers, a game time decision as well. But everyone else looks likely to play anyway. Let's jump off with the Mavs. We'll start with Luka Doncic. So his points props at 33.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10 games. The matchup, not a good one or a bad one against the Pacers. In head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 1 out of his last 2. So this is their first matchup this season. That points prop does appear a little bit too high for my liking, but shit. It was only, 2 to 3 weeks ago where this guy's line was like 38.5. So 33.5 seems like a steal. But let's check out his other props. Assists, his line is at 10.5 for assists, which is absolutely wild. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. Tough matchup. The Pacers allow the 3rd fewest assists to point guards on the season. And Luka has gone under this the last 2 times they played each other. So the line at 10.5 seems crazy. I'm having a look at here just the pace. So the Pacers play at the 2nd highest pace in the league. Dallas at 8th. So it should be a fast game, and I think there'll be a lot of opportunities for Luka to get assists. But I feel like part of the reason why the Pacers give up so little assists is that they don't defend the basket very well. So it's kind of easier to score against them. So I'm thinking over in his points, under his in assists right now. That's where my mind's going in terms of my Luka script. Checking out his rebounds, the line is at 8.5 plus 100. I don't mind that. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 5, but 7 out of his last 10. Check that out. 8+ rebounds every single game. In head-to-head matchups, he's had 8 and 7. Matchups, not good nor bad. So, yeah, I think 8 rebounds for Luka, if you're looking at maybe building some parlays, is a good play. I wouldn't touch his assist prop, but his rebound prop, I can get with that. Fast-paced game, a lot of opportunities, lots of chances to get those boards. Let's check out Kyrie Irving. His points props at 26.5 or 27.5, depending on where you look. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in his last 2 games against the Pacers. The Pacers do allow the 12th most points to shooting guards on the season, so the matchup's not good nor or bad. Point prop wise, yeah, look, I'd love to see him go over. I've said it many times before. He's my favorite player, but I haven't put too many bets on him, but I love seeing him go over. Looking at his assist prop, line is at 5.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. The Pacers allow the 4th fewest assists to shooting guards on the season. Head-to-head matchups, Kyrie's cleared this in his last 2 games against Indiana, although both of these games were last season. Looking at Kyrie's boards, line's at 4.5. He's hit this in 9 out of his last 10 games. The Pacers allow the 2nd fewest rebounds to shooting guards on the season. So he's hit this in 9 out of his last 10, and he's hit this in 16 of his last 20. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone 5 and 3. So who would have thought Kyrie rebounds would have such a high hit rate? So, look, I get the matchup is somewhat difficult, but shit, that's not too bad. He's been hitting it so often. I'm going to put Kyrie rebounds on my things to look into. All right, let's see what else we got. So Kyrie, you're done. Who else is there from Dallas? Let's have a look at Derek Lively. So the Indiana Pacers allow the 9th fewest points to centers on the season. Lively's line is at 7.5, which is hitting 6 of his last 10. He's yet to verse the Indiana Pacers, but we could look at his last 10 games on the road. And Lively has covered in 7 of his last 10 road games. So that's not too bad. Looking at his rebound prop, the line's at 5.5. The Pacers do allow the 6th fewest rebounds to centers. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. And looking at his road games, he's covered in 8 of his last 10. So he's done quite well on the road. If we look at his points and rebounds, he's hit 7 of his last 10. Breaking into his road games only, and it's 7 of his last 10. The matchup is a difficult one for him, though. But, yeah. The Indiana Pacers give up a lot of paints at the rim, and that's how Derek Lively scores all of his points. So it could be a good option. I'm not... fuck it. I have to look at Josh Green, don't I? Let's check out Justy's points prop. Yeah, his line is at 8.5. He's got a good matchup. The Pacers do allow the 4th most points to small forwards on the season. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. Against the Pacers, he's gone under both of the last 2 times. He played 20 minutes in those games. These days, he's seeing about 25 to 30 minutes on average. His last 2 games, he has seen slightly less minutes, but yeah, I'm not feeling it for Josh Green. I know that you're Australian, but I still can't back you in, brother. Jumping into the Indiana Pacers, who do we got? Let's check out Hallie. So Tyrese Halliburton, his points prop is 22.5. He's hit this in 1 out of his last 10 games, and that just happened to be his last game. In terms of the matchup, the Mavericks allow the 7th fewest points to point guards on the season. In head-to-head matchups, Hallie's last game against them, he scored 32 points. So stick your matchup up your ass, Hallie says. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 11.5. He's hit this in 4 consecutive games, but only in 4 out of his last 10. Last time he played Dallas, he had 6 assists. The Dallas Mavericks allow the 11th fewest assists to point guards on the season. So, yeah, I'm not too sure. I'm not feeling Hallie in this one. I'm sure he's going to have a great game. I just can't tell you whether he's going to be passing the rock or scoring a lot of points. So that one's a little bit tough to pick. Let's have a look at Benedict Mathurin, starting small forward these days. His points props at 15.5. He's covered this in 2 out of his last 10. The Mavericks allow the 8th fewest points to small forwards. Last time he played Dallas, he scored 26 points in a 23-point loss. Check his rebounds prop real quick. That's at 4.5. He's covered this in 8 of his last 10 games. The Mavericks do allow the 10th most rebounds to small forwards, and Mathurin had 4 rebounds in both of his games against Dallas. In those games, 26 and 38 minutes. So These days, he's playing 26 minutes on average, but he has been hitting this quite well as of late. But he hasn't got it done against Dallas before, so might be one to consider. Who else do we have? Pascal Siakam. Let's check him out. Now, Spicy P, his line is at 23.5. The Dallas Mavericks allow the sixth most points to put out power forwards on the season. Pascal Siakam hasn't versed the Dallas Mavericks since he joined the Indiana Pacers, but I'm pretty sure he's got a strong history of playing them in the past. Let's check his home games. Pascal Siakam's covered in 4 out of his last 10 home games. So, yeah, 23.5 seems a bit steep to me. He's not shooting the ball as much as he did when he was in Toronto. They play at a higher pace. He's still playing a lot of minutes. He's taking on average 15.5 shots, shooting him at 57% too, but hasn't been able to hit Pascal Siakam. So I don't think he's not getting to the line much at all. 3.7 free throw attempts per game. So taking shots, he's just not getting to the line. Whoops, got to check his other props. Assist-wise, you're looking at 3.5. The matchup is a good one. The Mavs give up a lot of assists to power forwards. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. Looking at his rebounds, the Mavs allow the 12th most rebounds to power forwards. His line's at 6.5 for plus money, but he's only hit that in 3 out of his last 10. The line opened at 6.5, but it's been moving between 5.5 and 6.5. So the betters are torn. I'm not feeling anything for Pascal in that one. Miles Turner's the last one I wanted to look at. Let's check out his points and rebounds. His points props at 17.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. The Mavs allow the 12th fewest points to centers on the season. Head-to-head wise, he did score 24 points the last time they played each other. Checking out his rebounds, lines are at 7.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. And got 7 rebounds the last time he played Dallas. Mavericks allowed the 13th most rebounds to centers on the season. So the matchup's not good or bad. So now we're breaking down this game. I'd have to say some of Luka's props, probably most reliable, that's hitting on a consistent basis. Oh, we didn't look at PJ Washington. My bad. His points props at 12.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. So he's played 4 games since he joined Dallas, and he's only hit the line once. You know that power forwards tend to score whenever they want against the Indiana Pacers. But yeah, he's only hit this 4 times. He's playing decent minutes. He's not taking many shots though. So what happens when you play with Luka, my friend. All right, let's jump into the next game. All right, we're looking at the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Washington Wizards. Donovan Mitchell's a game time decision, and Denny Advia's a game time decision as well. So let's quickly have a look at D. Mitch. His points prop is at 27.5. Everyone for Cleveland's going to have a good matchup here because the Washington Wizards can't play defense to save their lives. He's hit this line in 7 out of his last 10 and only in 2 of his last 6 against Washington. He did score 40 points against them when they last played, though. Looking at his assist prop, he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. Great matchup for his assists. And in head-to-head matchups, he's gone under his assist prop in every game against the Washington Wizards. Rebounds, lines at 4.5. He's hit in 5 of his last 10. Great matchup for him to get boards. And he's covered in 4 of his last 6 games against the Washington Wizards. So given he's got a good matchup all over the place, you might want to look at his PRA. It's at 38.5. That's only hit in 2 of his last 6 games against Washington, but it has hit in 6 of his last 10 games overall. Let's have a look at Jared Allen. His points prop is 17.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. One of the easiest matchups in basketball. The Wizards give up the second most points to centers on the season. Jared Allen, 6 out of his last 10, but he's only covered in 1 of his last 5 against Washington. So good matchup, hasn't delivered. Looking at his rebounds, line's at 11.5. He's only hit that in 2 of his last 10 games. Head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 3 out of his last 5. So the matchup's good, but he hasn't been hitting this line very well against them. Having a look at Evan Mobley, very similar. He's got an easy matchup. Points-wise, 14.5. He's hit this in 3 of his last 10. And he has hit this in 3 out of his last 4. So he's hit in 3 straight games against Washington. This man's taken advantage of the matchup, that's for sure. Looking at his rebound prop, line's at 9.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. Against the Wizards, he's gone under in 4 consecutive games. So that makes it a little bit difficult to predict. I also want to take the time to apologize if you hear some snoring. I've definitely bored somebody to death by now, but hopefully it's not the people listening and watching this. My dog sleeps under my desk while I'm in the lab doing some research. She's an American bully, so she can't breathe to save her life. So she just snores all day. So my apologies if you hear too much of that. Jumping into these Washington Wizards players, though, Tyus Jones, he was on a mad streak of hitting numbers consistently, but then in his last game, absolutely shit the bed. And of course, I bet on him. But up against Cleveland today, points wise, his line's at 11.5, which he's hit in 7 out of his last 10 games. Against Cleveland, he's done well in his last 2, scoring 16 and 15 points. The matchup's not a good one or a bad one. So Tyus Jones, it could be someone you fuck around with. He only played 23 minutes in that last game, shot 2 for 8 from the field. Bounce back game could be an option here because looking at his assist prop, line's at 8.5. He's hit that in 5 out of his last 10 games. Has a difficult matchup. The Cavs allow the fewest assists to point guards, and he's gone under this in 3 consecutive games against the Cavs. So I don't mind his points prop though, to be honest. 11.5. If he's going to shoot the ball 8 times, he usually shoots a pretty good percentage, I must say. Let's have a look at Marvin Bagley. So I've been betting on his rebounds quite frequently since the Daniel Gafford trade. Let's see if we can find some juice for him again. Points prop, he's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. The Cavs allow the 7th fewest points to centers, though. Doesn't have a head-to-head matchup against them. But where's his game being played? In Washington. So it's a home game for him. 5 of his last 10 home games, he's covered his points line. His rebound line is at 7.5 for plus money. Give me that. I want it already. So, as you can see, he's had some great rebounding games as of late. 7.5 is the prop. The matchup's not a bad one. So that's pretty positive. In these games, what's he doing? He's only playing 21 minutes a game, which is pretty crazy. So these 2 games, played a lot of minutes. I guess when you're getting blown out, you're not going to play too many minutes, are you? Up against Cleveland, is there blowout potential here? Well, yeah, the line is 11 points. So it's a pretty decent spread. So you're looking for Bagley to get 7.5 rebounds in 15 to 20 minutes. I think I might still rock with it, to be honest. I don't mind that. Marvin Bagley. Let me write that shit down. All right. Let's have a look at Kyle Kuzma. His points prop is 19.5. He's hit in 6 out of his last 10 games. Matchup. Oh, the Cavs. They allow the 5th fewest rebounds to power forwards on the season. Fewest rebounds. 5th fewest points. My bad. Kuzma's covered this line in 1 of his last 5. The last game he played against them, though, he scored 28 points. So he's been scoring the ball quite well. Rebound-wise, line's at 6.5. Cavs now the 3rd fewest rebounds to power forwards. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 10, and he's gone under his rebound prop in every single game against Cleveland. He hasn't even gotten close, really. So I don't mind the under there for Kuzma rebounds. And then looking at his assists, his line's at 3.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. Difficult matchup for his assists. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under his assist prop in every single game too. So I've got a lean at the moment. I'll probably just look at Kyle Kuzma rebounds and assists and then just take the under perhaps. Where's that? So the line for him is at 10.5. The most he's gotten against Cleveland is 6. He's also only hit this in 2 out of his last 10. So he's gone to the under 8 times. So, and there are games where he went over it. He went with 11 and 12 rebounds, which is pretty crazy. So I don't mind that. Difficult matchup for both. Kyle Kuzma, under 10.5. Definitely something I'll consider. Who else is there? Denny Advia. He's a game time decision, so we won't spend too much time on him. But points-wise, he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. He's gone under in every game against Cleveland. Rebound-wise, he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. He's hit it in 1 of 6 against Cleveland. And assist-wise, 2 out of his last 6 against them, and only in 3 of his last 10. So I think the one thing I need to factor in for Kyle Kuzma is what happens if Denny Advia doesn't play. So let's check out Kuzma's rebounds and assists and games without Denny. See what happens here. All right. So 3 games without him. He's got 7, 14, and 6 in head-to-head matchups. Denny's always been there. So I think the under in Kyle Kuzma is probably still worth it. Other than that, no other props available for the Washington Wizards players. So let's jump into the next one. We got the Chicago Bulls, Pelicans. So only Bulls players are available at the moment, but that's because Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, both game time decisions. CJ McCollum is out as well. So we've just got the Bulls players to really look at for now. So Start with the point guard, Kobe White. His points prop is at 22.5. Pelicans allow the 10th fewest points to point guards on the season. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. Last game against the Pels, he scored 31 points. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 5.5. You can get that for plus money. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup's a difficult one, but he did have 6 assists the last time he versus the Pelicans. And rebound-wise, his line's at 4.5, plus money as well. 6 of his last 10, and he had 9 rebounds against the Pelicans, who apparently give up the least rebounds to point guards on the season. So Kobe White obviously had a monster game the last time he played the Pels, but very capable of hitting any of these props. You just got to find the right one, I guess, because he does put up some great statistical games. You just got to dive in a little bit deeper to see which one you like. Ayo Dosunmu. Line's at 14.5 points. You can get that for plus money. 5 out of his last 10. The Pels they give up the third most points to shooting guards. So it's a good matchup for him in head-to-head matchups. He did score 15 the last time they played, but he went under in the 2 prior. Have a look at DeMar DeRozan. His points line's at 22.5. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. Pels give up the 4th fewest points to power forwards. DeRozan's more of a 3, but the way that their line's set up, he does start the game off as a 4. Either way, difficult matchup for him. 7 out of his last 10. He has covered this in 3 consecutive games against the Pelicans, though, so he loves it. Look at his assist prop as well. 4.5's the line. He's hit in 7 of his last 10, and he's hit in 2 out of the 3 games against the Pelicans. And rebound-wise, line's at 3.5. He's hit that in 2 out of his last 3 games against the Pels, and 6 of his last 10 overall. So DeRozan, fairly good performances in all areas. So his PRA, he's hit in 6 out of his last 10. And he's hit his PRA, the same PRA of 39 in 3 consecutive games against them. So that's pretty good. And looking at his last 10, he's definitely capable of delivering on that 39 PRA. It just depends on whether the Pels can slow him down offensively. So I haven't bet on DeMar DeRozan for quite a long time since he burnt me with one bet, but I don't mind that. The over for his PRA, it's not too bad. Look at Vucevic. Let's have a look at this. Line's at 18.5. He's hit it in 7 of his last 10 games. Pelicans are the 10th most points to centers on the season. Vucevic has struggled, though, going under in 3 consecutive games against the Pels. Looking at his rebounds, his line is at 10.5. He's got a good matchup for rebounds. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. Head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 consecutive games against the Pels. So Vucevic got some good form, got some good matchup, just struggled against Jonas Valanciunas by the looks of things. Assist-wise, he's gone over 1 out of 3 games, and he's hit in 6 of his last 10. And again, the matchup is good. So he's got a great matchup, perfectly capable, but Jonas Valanciunas might have his number. Let's jump into the next game. It's the Orlando Magic versus the Atlanta Hawks. So Orlando on a back-to-back here. Atlanta, they're missing Trae Young. Fucking Trae Young. I bet him to go over in his assists, and he absolutely sucked. But Trae Young is out. Okongwu's out. Markel Fultz still out for Orlando as well. So let's have a look here. We'll kick it off with these Atlanta Hawks players, starting with Sadiq Bey. We'll go from the top and work our way down. His points line's at 14.5. Magic, 13th fewest points to small forwards. He's hit in 7 of his last 10, and he's hit it in 1 of 3 games against Orlando. Checking out his rebounds, he's hit in 6 of his last 10, and against the Magic, he's hit in 1 of his last 3. So I'm not getting any strong vibes on this one. I think the main player I'd really want to look at is Jalen Johnson and DeJounte Murray, but let's do the right thing and do a deeper dive on everybody. Clint Capella, his line's at 9.5. He's covered that in 7 of his last 10. I think he just came back from injury against the Raptors, only scored 5 points, played 19 minutes. So looking at head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 3 out of his last 6 games against Orlando, so he hasn't gone too well. Rebound-wise, his line is at 8.5. You can get that for plus money. He's hit in 3 of his last 6 against the Magic, but he's hit in 8 of his last 10 overall. 7 rebounds against the Raptors in 20 minutes, so has a difficult matchup, but yeah, I could see him covering his rebound line, actually. Very efficient, and based on how these teams play, there's going to be a lot of rebounds available. Let's have a look at Jalen Johnson. Points-wise, line's at 15.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10 games, has a difficult matchup. Head-to-head matchups against the Magic, he's covered in 1 out of his last 6. Assist-wise, lines at 3.5 plus 100. He's hit in 6 of his last 10. And against the Magic, he's hit in 1 of his last 6. Rebound-wise, lines at 8.5. He's covered this in 3 consecutive games against Orlando. He's hit it in 6 of his last 10. So yeah, I don't mind the rebound one, but that's minus 135. So now I don't like it. Let's have a look at DeJounte Murray. His points props at 23.5. He's hit that in 3 of his last 10. Against the Magic, he's hit it in 3 of his last 6, but 2 of those were this season. The Magic give up the 10th fewest points to point guards on the season. I guess what I really wanted to look at for DeJounte Murray is how he's gone without Trae Young. So no Trae Young in the lineup. He's covered this points line in 5 of his last 10. Well, that's not exciting at all. Looking at his assist prop, though, lines at 7.5. He's hit this in 2 out of his last 10 games. But let's check him out without Trae Young. You would assume he'd play a lot better, and he does. So he's covered this line of 7.5 in 6 of his last 10 games without Trae Young. Somewhat difficult matchup, though. The Magic allow the 3rd fewest assist to point guards on the season. So I'm not really feeling that too much. Let's check out his rebound prop. Lines at 5.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10 and only in 2 of his last 6 against the Magic. So, yeah, I'm not feeling that one for DeJounte Murray. Bogdanovic moves into the starting lineup. His points props at 17.5. He's only hit this in 3 out of his last 10. But let's do the work and take Trae Young out of the equation. Bogdanovic, if Trae Young is out, Bogdanovic is starting. So he's covered in 5 of his last 10 games. Hasn't versed the Magic without Trae Young in the lineup. But I think this line is pretty much smack bang on. 17.5. He'd finished on 17 quite a few times. So yeah, I think he has a decent game. He'll play more minutes. He'll take a lot of shots. 15 points I'd be comfortable to take. Taking his 17.5 as a single, that's not getting me aroused at all. And the 2 players from the Magic I want to look at are Banchero and Franz Wagner. So Banchero just hit a game winner today against Detroit. He was playing terrible all game, but still, he made the shot that counted. Lines at 22.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. Has a great matchup. The Hawks struggle against power forwards. In head-to-head matchups, Banchero's gone over in his last 2 games against Atlanta, 35 and 26, but he did go under in 5 games prior to that. His assist prop lines at 6.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10, but he's gone under in 3 straight. Another great matchup against Atlanta, but he has only hit this in 1 of 7 games against them. Rebound-wise, line is at 6.5. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 10. Great matchup for him, but he's only hit this in 3 of his last 7. So Banchero, despite struggling to hit a lot of these lines recently, we've seen his lines move up, and that's because the matchup is good. But he hasn't done a great job of hitting these numbers against Atlanta anyway, so I wouldn't play them. Franz, his point signs at 20.5. He sucked today too. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. Has a good matchup. Against Atlanta, he's covered in 2 of his last 5. Looking at his assists, he's covered in 5 of his last 10, and he's gone under in every game against Atlanta. Looking at his rebounds, lines at 4.5, which is covered in 5 of his last 10 games, and he's covered in 4 of his last 5 games against the Hawks. So that's not too bad, but this is inconsistent as hell. So yeah, to be honest, in this game, I'm not particularly loving anything. Maybe some alternate lines for some same game parlays, same game multis, perhaps. Probably take DeJounte Murray assists, Bogdanovic some points, maybe some Clint Capella rebounds. Actually, no, Jalen Johnson will probably take some rebounds. So that might be something I can get with, but I haven't made up my mind just yet. Let's jump into the next one. Is Golden State Warriors versus the Denver Nuggets. Jamal Murray and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, all game time decisions. So we have limited markets available for the Denver Nuggets. But let's start with these Warriors. Steph Curry, point signs at 26.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10 games. The matchup is a somewhat difficult one. The Nuggets allow the 9th fewest points to point guards on the season. Steph Curry against the Nuggets has hit this in 3 out of his last 6 games. Did score 30 points the last times they played. Looking at his assists, the line's at 5.5. You can get that for plus 112. He's hit in 4 of his last 10 games. And he had 6 assists the last time they played. But prior to that, he had gone under this line in every single game. Looking at his rebound line, it's at 3.5. He's hit in 4 of his last 6 against Denver. He's only hit in 5 of his last 10 games on the season. Klay Thompson, coming off the bench, I assume. His line's only 11.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10, 4 of his last 5 games against the Nuggets. So that's interesting. I'm assuming he came off the bench against Charlotte, only played 21 minutes. So Klay Thompson playing 21 minutes, 11.5 points. He's still going to take a lot of shots in that time, isn't he? They took 11 shots in 21 minutes. Okay. I'm going to have to wait that out, see what Klay Thompson does over the next couple of weeks. Podziemski's taken Klay Thompson's spot, starting shooting guard. 5 of his last 10, he's covered his points line. Against the Nuggets, he scored 13 points 2 games in a row. I do like the work this guy does on the glass. Checking out his rebound prop. It's at 5.5. Here we go. 5.5. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10 games. Against Denver, he's got 1 game with 9 rebounds, but he only had 2 rebounds in the others. His assist prop, that's at 4.5. He's hit that in 7 of his last 10. He's hit that in 2 consecutive games against Denver. So that's not too bad. Podziemski. Who else do we have? Andrew Wiggins. Let's have a look at his points prop. Line's at 12.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. Hit this in 2 of his last 5 against Denver as well. So, yeah, I don't think anyone's betting on Andrew Wiggins anymore. Jonathan Kuminga, his points line continues to drop. And fair enough, his points just continue to drop in general. So he's covered this in 4 out of his last 10, but he is sliding. He's only covered his points line 5. He's covered it. He's failed to cover it in 5 consecutive games. God, I've got to stop drinking. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under this points line in 4 consecutive games against the Denver Nuggets. So I would personally lean to the under on this already. Looking at his rebound prop, it's 5.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, and he's gone under in 4 consecutive games against the Denver Nuggets. The matchup is a good one, though, but Kuminga hasn't been able to fire against them. Heading over to the Denver Nuggets players, let's start with MPJ. Michael Porter Jr., his line is at 18.5, which is high. And when his line is that high, I get the feeling that Jamal Murray's not going to play. But he's hit this in 3 consecutive games now, 5 of his last 10. Against the Warriors, he's covered this in 2 out of his last 6. Rebound-wise, he's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 3 of his last 6 games against the Golden State Warriors. The matchup is a good one, though. Actually, it's not a great one. Aaron Gordon's got the better rebounder matchup. So, all right, let's have a look at Jamal Murray just in case he does play. Points prop is 20.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. He's covered in 4 consecutive games against the Golden State Warriors. So I like that. The matchup is great. Golden State got the second most points to point guards on the season. So if Jamal Murray does play, he's got a great matchup. His recent form's not great, but the matchup is there nonetheless. And looking at his assists, the line's at 7.5. He's hit in 4 of his last 10. He's covered in 2 of his last 4 against the Warriors. So definitely the points for Jamal Murray is what I'd be thinking. Despite his recent form, looks like he loves playing the Golden State Warriors. Let's have a look at Aaron Gordon. His points props at 15.5. I don't think Jamal Murray's paying. You can't have Aaron Gordon at 15.5 and MPJ at 18.5. That's just crazy. He's covered this in 4 of his last 10. Got a good matchup against the Warriors. Head-to-head wise, scored 30 points the last time they played, 16 the one prior to that. Both of those games were this season. The main thing to look through is rebounds. Line's at 5.5. He's covered that in 4 straight games against the Warriors. In his last 10, he's covered this 5 out of the last 10. So the matchup is an excellent one. We'll check to see if we find that Nikola Jokic struggles on the boards against the Warriors, then I think Aaron Gordon's a good shout. Look at Nikola Jokic here. His points props at 27.5. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 10 games. Against the Warriors, he's covered this in 2 of his last 5. Looking at his assist prop, he's covered it in 4 of his last 10. Line's at 9.5. Against the Warriors, he's covered this in 3 out of his last 5. Rebound-wise, his line's at 12.5. He's got some decent rebounds against the Warriors. He's covered in 3 out of his last 5. And then his last 10 games overall, he's hit this 6 times. So, yeah, I feel like a lot of the lines are pretty much smack bang on. Aaron Gordon rebounds. I don't mind that. I think that's a really good play. Jonathan Kuminga's not going to light him up from downtown either. So, good opportunity for Aaron Gordon. But let's jump into the next one. It's the OKC Thunder versus the Houston Rockets. All right, so in this particular game, everyone's pretty much going to play. It's just, I think, Tari Eason's the only one out. No game time decisions in this one. So let's go. We'll start with these Houston Rockets, though. Fred VanVleet, he's recently back from injury, so we'll see what happens with these lines. Lines at 15.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. The matchup with OKC is not bad. Head-to-head matchups, he only scored 11 points in his last game against the OKC Thunder. Looking at his assists, the line's at 6.5. He's gone under in 5 consecutive games. He's hit in 4 of his last 10. The matchup is a good one. He did have 9 assists the last time he played OKC. Looking at his rebound prop, the line's at 3.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. Against OKC, he had 3 rebounds the last time. So nothing for Fred's yelling out to me. Jalen Green, points prop, 15.5 plus 100. There's a good matchup today. They're giving it the second most points to shooting guards on the season. Looking at his head-to-head form, he's covered in 1 out of his last 4 and last 10 games. He's had some pretty quiet games on there. I don't know what the hell's going on there. Assists, his line's at 2.5. He's hit that in 7 of his last 10, but wildly inconsistent against OKC. And looking at his rebounds, 1 out of his last 4 against them and 5 out of his last 10 overall. Şengün, points prop, 19.5. He's hit it in 4 of his last 10 games. Against OKC, he's hit this twice, 2 out of 5 games. So that's not great. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 4.5. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone over in 2 out of his last 5. Looking at his rebounds, line's at 9.5. It's a good matchup for boards. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10. And against OKC, he's covered this in 3 out of his last 5. So if I had to pick one, it'd be Şengün, but at these odds, no, I'm not mucking around with that at all. We then have Jabari Smith. Let's check out his points and rebounds. Points-wise, 13.5. He's hit it in 3 of his last 10. Against the Thunder, he's covered in 2 of his last 5. Looking at rebounds, his line's at 9.5, which is covered in 4 of his last 10 games. Last game against OKC, he had 18 rebounds. Prior to that, he went under in 3 consecutive games. So, somewhat decent matchup. They do give up a lot of rebounds, OKC, but yeah, I'm not feeling Jabari Smith. I'm actually never feeling him, to be honest. Let's have a look at Dylan Brooks. His points prop is at 12.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10 games. He's gone under in 2 in a row. He got a tough matchup. The Thunder allow the fewest points to small forwards on the season. And in head-to-head matchups, Dylan Brooks did score 23 points the last time he played OKC. So you can put some value into that if you wish. Looking at OKC, let's start off with SGA. His points prop is at 32.5. He's covered that in 3 out of his last 10 games. Difficult matchup against the Rockets, who allow the 5th fewest points to point guards on the season. SGA's covered this in 2 out of his last 5 games against them. Pretty much a lock for 25, but other than that, I probably wouldn't take any plays on him. Looking at his assists, line's at 6.5, which is covered in 7 out of his last 10. The Rockets allow the fewest assists to point guards on the season. SGA's got under this assist line in every game against the Houston Rockets too. Looking at his rebounds, 5.5's the line. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10, but only 1 of his last 5 against the 3 Houston Rockets. Who else is there? J-Dubs, check Jalen Williams out. His line's at 18.5. Got a good matchup today. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 games. Against the Rockets, though, he's gone under by a long way in every single game. Assist-wise, his line's at 4.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10 and only 1 of his last 5 against the Houston Rockets. And looking at his rebounds, the line is 3.5. He's covered that in 5 out of his last 10. Has a good matchup. And he's gone over this line in every single game against Houston Rockets. I guess the other thing to factor in, that 3.5, minus 165. So I wouldn't take that as a single bet, but he's got a good hit rate against Houston. But even his last 10, it's a little bit 5 out of his last 10. And for those odds, you probably expect a better hit rate. So where is Chet? Here's Chet. Chet Holmgren. His point sign's at 15.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10 games. Played 1 game against Houston and only scored 4 points. Rebound-wise, his line is at 8.5. He's covered in 3 straight and 5 of his last 10. Only had 5 rebounds against Houston last time. So, yeah, I'm not feeling him at all. Let's jump into the next one. It's the San Antonio Spurs versus the Utah Jazz. This one, Otto Porter and Morris are out. So I guess the major ins are still in. Let's start with these Spurs players first. We'll start with Devin Vassell. All right, Devin Vassell. His points line is at 20.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10 games. Up against Utah, he's covered it in 2 consecutive games. Looking at his assists, the line's at 4.5. He's covered in 3 of his last 10. The matchup's difficult. He's covered in 1 of his last 2 games against Utah. Don't trust the Sohan. Jeremy Sohan, 13.5 points. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. He's covered in 2 of his last 4 against Utah. He's got a pretty decent matchup. The Jazz allowing the most points to power forwards on the season now. I'd lean to the over, to be honest, but not with much confidence, if I'm going to be honest with you. Rebound-wise, line's at 6.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. He's gone under in all 4 games against the Utah Jazz. Who else is there? Victor Wembanyama. All right. So his points props at 23.5. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10 games. Quick look at his minutes. Starting to play a lot more minutes. 2 games with over 30 minutes. That's pretty good. He's played 1 game against Utah this year, and he scored 15 points against them. Looking at his rebounds, he's covered it in 5 of his last 10 against the Jazz. He only recorded 7 rebounds. And looking at his assists, lines at 3.5. He had 4 assists against the Jazz last time. He's covered his assist prop in 5 of his last 10, but he has covered it in 4 consecutive games. But you're getting minus 150 odds there for Victor. Let's have a look at his stocks, which is his steals and his blocks. Far out. So his line for his steals and blocks is at 4.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 games. He's covered it easy in his last 2 games. 3 out of his last 4 he's covered it in. And against Utah, he had 6, 5 blocks, and 1 steal the last time they played each other. So, look, if you're going to get Colin Sexton driving to the rim a lot, maybe you can get some easy blocks. The Jazz, they don't have too many great outside shooters, so I think Wemby blocks, that could be something that we entertain in this one. What's his line for blocks? 2.5, minus 157. You might as well take him for 3.5 blocks. But, yeah, there's Wemby's blocks if you're interested. Let's have a look at Trey Jones. His points props at 10.5, plus 100. Hasn't hit it for a bloody long time, so I wouldn't bet on that. I just wanted to have a look at his assist. His line's at 7.5. You can get that for plus money. 4 out of his last 10, and against Utah, he's gone under in all 3 games. So that was an absolute waste of time. Sorry about that. Let's have a look at these guys from Utah. John Collins, his points prop is at 14.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. John Collins probably spending a slightly less time at center these days, but he's still starting there. The matchup is a good one. The Spurs do allow the most points to centers on the season. The last time he versed the Spurs, he only scored 7 points. Looking at John Collins' rebounds, his line is at 9.5. He's been rebounding quite well lately. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. When he last played the Spurs, he got 4 rebounds. So in that game, he only played 18 minutes, though. These days, he's playing about 28 to 30 minutes on average. So, John Collins' rebounds, I like him to get some boards, but probably not 9.5. Probably take something a little bit lower. Keontae George. So, Keontae George, his points line's at 15.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10 games. He's now a starting point guard. So, he's been playing quite well. The matchup is a good one against the Spurs. So, 5 of his last 10. He only scored 10 points the last time he played the Spurs. Played 25 minutes in that game. He's seeing, since he moved to the starting lineup, he's seeing about 30 minutes per game. So his opportunities are definitely up. I think that line is right, but I wouldn't mind him to go over that one. Looking at his assists, the line's at 5.5. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 10 games, had 4 assists the last time he played the Spurs. Who else is there? Colin Sexton, points prop is at 19.5 points. He's covered this in 4 of his last 10 games. Against the Spurs, scored 20 points the last time they played and 13 points prior to that. But that was last season, so 20 points the last time he versus Spurs this year. The line seems about right, but let's check out his assist prop. 5.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. In head-to-head matchups, he had 6 assists the last time they played. So Colin Sexton, if you want to play some alt lines, I think he's a pretty good choice. He always seems to get after it. So look at Lauri Markkanen. Points line 23.5 or 24.5. He's only hit this in 2 out of his last 10. Head-to-head matchups, he's lit the Spurs up. He's covered it in 4 consecutive games against the San Antonio Spurs. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 2.5. He's hitting 3 of his last 10. He's gone under in every game against the Spurs. And his rebound prop, 8.5. He's hitting 5 of his last 10. And he's hit this in 3 of his last 4 games against the Spurs. So his form at the moment hasn't been great, but he does like playing against the San Antonio Spurs. All right, we've got 2 more games to get through. Let's do it. First one is the Charlotte Hornets versus the Portland Trail Blazers. And now in this game, Davis Bertans, a game time decision, but most likely out. LaMelo Ball's not ready to come back. And for Portland, they still have Brogdon out, Henderson out, probably the key call-outs. So let's get into this. Let's start with DeAndre Ayton. Now, he's got a good matchup here. Centers against Charlotte, great matchup. Points-wise, his line's at 16.5. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10 games. Every time I look at this graph and this game is still on here, I'm going to bring it up. So he's at great form. I think I bet on him to score 15 points against Minnesota and finish with 2. What a piece of shit. Then he comes back, scores 22 points against the Denver Nuggets. Old-looking bastard. But his form is great. Let me get back on track here. Covering in 8 out of his last 10 games. I do like that prop for this game. Looking at his rebounds, the line's at 10.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. He's got a great matchup here against the Hornets as well, but a little less consistent rebounding the ball DeAndre Ayton is. Jeremy Grant, he's got a great matchup today. His line's at 23.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10. Scored 32 points the last time he played the Charlotte Hornets. That was a long time ago, but positive game nonetheless. Looking at his rebounds, line's at 3.5. He's covered it in 5 of his last 10. But look at that. 1 or 2 rebounds. Unpredictable to bet on Jeremy Grant's rebounds. You'd be crazy if you did. Anthony Simons, his points propped at 23.5, which is covered in 5 of his last 10. Hasn't had much luck against the Hornets in the past, going under in both games. Looking at his assist prop, though, the line's at 6.5. He's covered that in 4 of his last 10 games. Against the Hornets, he's gone under both of those games as well. Who else is there from Portland? Okay, so they're the only Portland players. Let's jump into these guys from Charlotte. Now, we've got to look at Trey Mann. So I've been betting on Trey Mann for quite a bit. He finally had a slow game. So I lost my bet, but nonetheless, his points line is at 12.5, and I think that's the right spot to have it. The matchup with Portland is somewhat decent when it comes to scoring points, but he's only covered this in 2 of his last 10, but really 2 of his last 6 where he's been playing in the starting lineup. Looking at his assist prop, his line's at 4.5. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 10, but 3 out of the 6 since joining the Hornets. And his rebound prop's probably the best one for him. Line's at 4.5. He's covered 4 rebounds in every game since joining the starting lineup, but the 4.5 he's hit 4 times. So there's Trey Mann. We've got Miles Bridges. This guy's been a beast lately. His points props at 24.5. He's covered this in 4 of his last 10. Hasn't versed Portland since he came back from his suspension. So let's have a look at his rebounds prop. That's at 8.5 plus 100. 3 of his last 10, but 3 of his last 4, he's gone berserk on the boards. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 3.5. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10. That's not too bad either. Check out Brandon Miller. His points prop is at 19.5. It's plus money if you got the balls to take it. He's gone over in 5 of his last 10, but it's like 1 of his last 6. So he's not playing too well at the moment. There's a great matchup, though. The Trailblazers give up the most points of shooting guards on the season, but he is playing the 3 now that Cody Martin's in there, and that's where he's got the most difficult position. I think regardless if he plays the 2 or the 3, he's going to see probably a lot of Matisse Thybulle, maybe a bit of Chris Murray in there. Brandon Miller, not really feeling his props. Cody Martin. Now, I just want to look at his rebound prop because I've been hitting that for a fair bit now. Points-wise, you wouldn't touch. Where's your rebounds, boy? Here he is. Okay. So the line's at 4.5 plus money. He's got a decent matchup. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. So that I might consider if I can still get that at plus money by the time I put the bet on. Cody Martin rebounds. I need to research it a little bit more, but I have been betting on his rebounds quite often, especially because I'm getting odds like this. I'll just keep taking it. That's Cody Martin. Let's have a quick look at Nick Richards. Points-wise, he's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Scored 6 points against the Blazers last time. Rebound-wise, 7 of his last 10 he's covered this line. And I think Oh, I only had 2 rebounds. Jesus. How long have I been doing this? Let me check this. Oh, God. Getting close to 2 hours. The things I do for you guys. All right, let's jump into the last game so I can start editing this thing up and sending it out to you all. We have the Sacramento Kings versus the Los Angeles Clippers. Norman Powell's a game time decision for the Clippers. Let's start off with these Sacramento Kings. Start Malik Monk. His points prop is at 16.5. Woo! That's a lot of green. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10 games. So that's pretty juicy. In terms of the head-to-head matchup, he's only hit this in 1 of 6 games against the Clippers, though. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 4.5. He's hit that in 5 of his last 10 games. Against the Clippers, he's only hit this in 3 of his last 6. The matchup's not good nor bad for Malik Monk. The minus a bonus, let's check everything that Mr. Triple Double has. I think he's got the most triple doubles out of anyone this season. That's pretty wild. But his points props at 20.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. Difficult matchup. The Clippers allow the fewest points to centers on the season. The bonus has hit this in 2 of his last 6 against them. Jumping into his assist prop, the line's at 8.5. He struggled to get assists against the Clippers. He's gone under in 6 games. In his last 10 games, though, he's covered this 7 times. So he's had, 7 triple-doubles in his last 10 games, perhaps? That's pretty crazy. Checking out his rebounds prop, 12.5 the line. He's hit it in 6 of his last 10. And he's gone under against the Clippers in 6 consecutive games. Oh, that's not good either. So you might even want to look at, what's his PRA against the Clippers? He's gone under 41.5 PRA in 6 consecutive games against the Clippers. He's got a difficult matchup for points, rebounds, and assists. Now, that would be a brave move to take his under, because in his last 10 games, he's covered his PRA 8 out of the last 10 games. So what are you going to factor in here? This is what I want you guys to answer me in the comment section below. Minus a bonus PRA. He's covered in 8 of his last 10, but he's gone under 6 consecutive games against the Clippers. Which one do you think happens? Do you think he goes over, or do you think he goes under? Let me know in that comment section. All right, let's check out De'Aaron Fox. His points prop is at 25.5. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10. Against the Clippers, he's gone over in 4 of his last 6. Only scored 14 points the last time they played. So that's quite interesting for Mr. Fox. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 5.5. He has covered this in 5 of his last 10, but 5 of his last 6, really, he's been covering this assist prop. In head-to-head matches, he's only covered in 2 of his last 6 against the Clippers. So a lot of good form for these Kings players coming in, but it looks like they've struggled against these Clippers in the past. Speaking of the Clippers, let's go through them. James Harden. Points line 17.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. Doesn't have a bad matchup for points, but let's check this out. 2 games against the Kings, 1 over, 1 under. Looking at his assist prop, the line is at 8.5. He's gone under it in 6 consecutive games now, hitting 2 of his last 10. Does have a good matchup, though. Kings allow a lot of assists to point guards, but in head-to-head matchups, James Harden's gone under in both games against them. His rebound prop's been hitting for me quite nicely. There you go. His line is still at 5.5, but it's not at plus money anymore. He's hit this in 8 out of his last 10. He's got a good rebounding matchup against the Kings, and he's hit this in 1 of his last 2. So James Harden rebounds, that's always a lean for me. I do like how often it hits. Let me chuck this down, something for me to research. Let's have a look at Kawhi Leonard. Points prop is 25.5. He's gone under this in 5 consecutive games, though. But he's had a lot of success against the Kings. He's gone over this in 3 consecutive games. So I think if you were going to bet on anyone for the Clippers to go over, it would have to be Kawhi Leonard, right? Because no one else is scoring quite well. Even though Kawhi Leonard's been a bit flat as of late, he's got a great matchup and he's performed well against the Kings in the past. I just realized I didn't check his rebound prop either. Let's check his rebounds. That's at 6.5 plus money. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. The matchup isn't a good one or a bad one, and he's covered it in 1 of 3. So wasted your time, and I shouldn't have checked that. Let's check out Zubac. Zubac. Line's at 12.5 points. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 10 games. Difficult matchup against the Kings, but he's hit this in 2 out of his last 4. Rebound-wise, his line's at 9.5. He's hit in 6 of his last 10, 4 consecutive games. And against the Kings, he's hit this in 3 out of his last. He's hit this in 1 of his last 4, actually. My apologies. Then we got Paul George. I think I bet he's under quite a few times this year, and it's cashed for me quite well because I don't know. Is he spending too much time in his podcast and less time focusing on basketball? Because he hasn't been delivering. In his last 10 games, he's only hit this points line twice. Head-to-head games against the Kings, he's been trending down. Check that out. Last year, killing it against them. This year, 19 and 9 points against the Sacramento Kings. So trending downwards for sure. Looking at his assist prop, lines at 3.5, which has hit in 6 of his last 10. Against the Kings, he has hit in 4 out of his last 5. And looking at his rebound prop, he's hit this in 3 out of his last 10. And against the Kings, he's actually hit it in 4 out of his last 5. So if I was going to take an under, it would just be on Paul George points. I might even take PG unders and points because it's been going well for me. I will research it a little bit further, but it's definitely something that I was thinking about before I even started looking at his numbers. But look, other than that, there's no one else I really think worth diving into. Once again, another long video from yours truly. We are back. I am still so hungover, so I apologize if I didn't have the same level of effort and enthusiasm that I normally would have. But look, if you made it this far, I do appreciate you. I do this on a daily basis, provided I'm not absolutely drunk and hung. I rarely do that anyway, so I do that every couple of months. So I'll be here every single day doing some previews, giving you all the information that you need to make the best bets possible. If watching this out 1 hour's worth of content still wasn't enough to feed your habit and you still want to see more of this ugly face of mine, feel free to check out this video. Check it out right here. I got some more content for you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Up to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to you live from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice and the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.